It was just another routine day at the clinic, at least, that's what they thought. But when a young girl walked in, acting a little off, no one could have predicted what would happen next. The father sat quietly, hoping for a quick checkup, unaware that what would unfold in the next few minutes would change everything. This wasn't just another visit. Something was about to happen that would leave even the most seasoned doctor speechless, questioning everything they thought they knew. As you sit there, wondering what could possibly happen during such an ordinary appointment, I want to tell you, brace yourself. You won't believe how this one ends. And I promise you, by the time you finish this video, you'll be asking yourself questions you never thought to ask before. Now, before you dismiss this as just another clinic drama, let me tell you this. What happened during that ultrasound completely floored everyone in the room. It wasn't supposed to be anything out of the ordinary. It was a simple checkup, the kind that happens thousands of times a day in clinics across the country. But the moment the doctor turned on that ultrasound machine, everything changed. This wasn't just about a scan, it was about uncovering a truth that no one was prepared for. And you're going to see it all unfold right here. Think about it for a moment. We all go to the doctor expecting answers, expecting things to go the way they're supposed to. But what if, just for a second, everything you knew about your life, about the people closest to you, was thrown into question? What if a simple test, a simple moment, turned everything you thought you knew upside down? That's the moment we're about to witness. But here's the thing, there's more to this story than meets the eye. The little girl, acting strangely, wasn't the only one who would soon be caught off guard. Her father, who came in simply to get a routine checkup, was about to experience something far more intense than he could have ever imagined. The doctor. Well, he wasn't just doing his job anymore. The ultrasound didn't just reveal a picture of the inside of the body, it revealed something that shook him to his core. And you're about to find out exactly what it was. Now, I can see you're intrigued. You're wondering what could possibly go wrong at a simple clinic appointment. You want answers. And I promise, you're going to get them. But the journey to understanding this story won't be as simple as you think. As we dive deeper into what happened that day, keep in mind that the truth isn't always easy to swallow. It's messy. It's complicated. And sometimes, it's downright shocking. Are you ready to unravel the mystery with me? Because this isn't just about a girl who acted off at a clinic. This is about something far deeper, something far more important than any of us could have imagined. It's about uncovering a truth that nobody was prepared for, and the consequences of that truth are going to hit everyone hard. You're not just going to watch this unfold, you're going to live it with them. And by the time this video ends, you'll understand why the doctor lost it. But don't go anywhere. Trust me when I say, you haven't even begun to understand the full story yet. What happens next will keep you on the edge of your seat. You'll never see this coming, and you'll be glad you stayed until the end. Stay with me, because this story is far from over, and you won't believe what happens next. So sit tight, pay attention, and let's dive into the beginning of a story that will keep you talking long after the video ends. As we dive deeper into the story, it's important to understand a bit about the main character, the girl at the center of this mysterious clinic visit. She's only 10 years old, but there's something about her that feels older, more worn out than her age would suggest. Over the past few months, her behavior had shifted, and it wasn't just something her parents noticed. Teachers, friends, even neighbors had started to comment on how different she seemed. Quiet. Distant. Almost like she was carrying a secret, something too heavy for her to bear at such a young age. Everyone noticed it, but nobody could pinpoint exactly what had changed. Her father, a hard-working man who tried his best to be there for his daughter, noticed it most of all. Yet, like many fathers, he assumed it was just a phase. Kids go through strange moods, he told himself. Maybe it's just a result of the stress in school, or maybe it's the pressure of growing up. But deep down, he had a gnawing feeling that this was more than just a simple phase. The clinic appointment was supposed to be routine, something that would ease his worries about her behavior. He wanted to make sure everything was okay with her physically, that there was no underlying issue. After all, stress can manifest in many ways. Maybe there was some medical explanation for her strange actions, he reasoned. Her acting off might be the result of something physical that she couldn't explain. So, they made the appointment. It wasn't a big deal, at least, that's what they thought. But as they walked into that sterile room, the atmosphere shifted. The usual hum of the clinic, the soft beeping of machines, and the low murmur of conversations were drowned out by the sense of anticipation in the air. The tension wasn't just in the room, it was something palpable, something the father could almost feel crawling along his skin. The little girl seemed more distant than usual, sitting there in silence, her small hands fidgeting with the hem of her jacket. It was as if she were already preparing herself for something she couldn't quite explain. As the doctor walked in, his smile barely reached his eyes. He was used to dealing with all sorts of patients, from the routine to the unusual, but there was something unsettling about this situation. He didn't know it yet, but he was about to become a key player in a drama he wasn't prepared for. He had seen his fair share of strange cases, but this was different. Something in the girl's eyes, something in her posture made him pause. Maybe it was the way she flinched when he approached her, or how her father seemed a little too tense, his hand tightly gripping the armrest of the chair. The doctor dismissed it at first, thinking it was just nerves. After all, who doesn't feel uneasy in a doctor's office? But as he moved through the typical steps, asking questions, conducting the examination, he realized that something about the girl's behavior didn't fit the usual pattern of a nervous child. She wasn't simply scared. There was something else there, something he couldn't quite grasp. When the time came to perform the ultrasound, he expected it to be just another routine scan. He had done hundreds of them, each one as boring and straightforward as the last. He applied the gel to her stomach, and as the screen flickered to life, showing the inside of her body, he wasn't prepared for what he saw next. For a moment, there was a blur of images, the usual shapes and shadows on the screen. But then, something caught his eye. The girl flinched, her body stiffening as she stared at the screen with wide eyes, as though she recognized something that he couldn't. Her breathing quickened, her hands clutched the sides of the examination table, and for the first time, the doctor felt a jolt of unease. It was as if she was seeing something in that ultrasound that no child should ever see. But what? The doctor glanced at the father, who was watching with a mixture of confusion and concern, and then back at the screen. He quickly looked away, a sinking feeling building in his stomach. Was he imagining it? Or was there something wrong? His hands shook ever so slightly as he adjusted the probe, trying to get a better look. The screen wavered, but he didn't get the image he was hoping for. Instead, he found himself staring at something that made his blood run cold. The image didn't make sense. It wasn't supposed to look like this. The scan didn't match what he expected, it wasn't consistent with any routine ultrasound results he'd seen before. And as much as he tried to push the thought away, he couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper, something darker was unfolding in front of him. He had been trained to stay calm, to remain professional. But in that moment, he knew something wasn't right. But here's the kicker, he wasn't the only one who was noticing it. As the minutes dragged on, more people began to sense that something was wrong. The nurses, the medical staff, they all felt the same shift in energy in the room. It was palpable. You could almost hear the silent question hanging in the air, what's going on with this girl? The father, completely unaware of the details on the screen, could feel the tension in the room growing. He saw the doctor's face change from one of professionalism to something else, a look that bordered on disbelief. But before he could ask what was going on, the doctor quickly cleared his throat and turned off the ultrasound. He mumbled something about needing to review the results, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. The tension in the room reached a breaking point, but just as quickly, the doctor covered it up, trying to put on his best reassuring smile. He told the father that the girl was perfectly fine, that the scan showed no major concerns. But something in the way he said it didn't quite sit right. The father left the clinic that day, thinking it was just another routine visit, unaware that the doctor had just experienced something he couldn't fully explain, and that the truth was far from the reassuring words he'd been told. Now, you might be wondering, what exactly was on that ultrasound? Was it a glitch? Was the doctor seeing things? Or was there something far deeper, something hidden beneath the surface, that the doctor wasn't prepared to confront? And more importantly, what does it mean for the girl and her father? As the story unfolds, more questions arise than answers. Was the girl acting off because of something physical, Or was it something psychological, something tied to her relationships with the people around her? Could someone have hurt her? Could someone be hiding a secret that she couldn't or wouldn't tell anyone? Or was the ultrasound revealing a truth too horrifying to comprehend, a secret buried so deep that even she didn't understand it yet? These are the questions that will keep you hooked as we dive further into the mystery. But don't get too comfortable. We're only scratching the surface, and there's so much more to uncover. Just trust me when I say nothing is what it seems, and you'll have to stay until the very end to uncover the truth. As the days passed after the clinic visit, the unease that settled in the doctor's office never quite left. The father, though still somewhat reassured by the doctor's words, couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. He kept replaying that moment in his mind, wondering if he had missed something. The girl, his daughter, had been acting strange for weeks now, and despite his best efforts to get to the bottom of it, no one could explain what was happening. The doctor's vague reassurances couldn't quiet his growing suspicion. So, he decided to take matters into his own hands. It wasn't long before he made a phone call to request the ultrasound images. He needed to see them for himself. He was already starting to feel the sting of doubt creeping in, unsure of the medical staff's willingness to fully disclose what they had seen. When the clinic's receptionist assured him they'd send the results over, he felt a small wave of relief. But that sense of comfort would be short-lived. A few days later, when the results finally arrived, something felt off. The images, which should have been clear, had inexplicably vanished. The email containing the files was empty, and when he called the clinic to inquire, the receptionist had no explanation. The person on the other end of the line seemed oddly distant, almost robotic in her responses. She promised to look into it, but the father couldn't shake the growing sense of unease in his gut. The images were gone, just like that, no trace, no record, nothing. It was as if they had been erased from existence. And the more he thought about it, the more the situation didn't add up. Why would the clinic send him empty files? Why would the receptionist be so vague? In desperation, he reached out to the doctor, hoping for some clarity. But when he called, the line went strangely silent before the doctor picked up. There was no warmth in his voice, no professionalism. The doctor's tone was flat, almost mechanical, as he insisted that everything had been taken care of, that there were no issues with the scan. "There's nothing more to worry about," he said. But the father knew deep down, he knew that the truth was being hidden from him. This is where things took a turn. Just as the father was about to make a decision to push further, to dig deeper, a familiar face appeared at his doorstep. It was his brother-in-law, Adam. Now, Adam had always been a part of the family, someone who had been close to the father for years. But lately, Adam had been distant. His visits were less frequent, and he seemed distracted, even evasive. When the father invited him inside, Adam didn't waste any time. He quickly asked if he'd been looking into the girl's health issues, giving him a cautious, almost warning look. The father, feeling a sudden spike of alarm, said yes. But Adam's response wasn't what he expected. He leaned in a little closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You need to stop digging, man. You're not going to like what you find." His words were sharp, direct, and almost threatening. The father froze. Adam was always the calm one in the family, the steady presence who never raised his voice. And yet, here he was, urging him to stop. Urging him to leave things alone. His tone had changed, and it made the father uneasy. Was Adam hiding something? Had he been involved in something that he didn't want anyone to uncover? The father tried to shake off the discomfort, but it lingered. He couldn't just ignore the warning. It didn't make sense. Adam was acting strange, just like his daughter. Everyone was acting strange. What was going on? It was then that he realized he needed to take matters into his own hands. No one else was going to help him get to the bottom of this, and certainly not Adam. But as he began to plot his next move, more strange things started happening. Late one night, the father went through the girl's belongings, looking for anything that might explain her odd behavior. He found a notebook buried deep under her bed, hidden between stacks of books and stuffed animals. The notebook was old, well-worn, and as he flipped through the pages, he noticed something that made his heart race. The girl had written about strange dreams, about people she didn't recognize, about places she had never been. And there, tucked away in the back of the notebook, was a name that the father didn't recognize. He spent hours looking through her school records, her journals, even old photos. It was during this late-night search that he stumbled upon something shocking, an old family photo, one that had been taken years ago at a family gathering. The photo showed the girl as a young child, sitting beside her mother, who had passed away a few years ago. Nothing out of the ordinary, except for the man standing in the background. The father didn't recognize him at first, but there was something about the man's eyes, something dark, something familiar. The image stirred something deep within him, a gnawing feeling that he couldn't shake. It was the look in the man's eyes that unnerved him. As he stared at the photo, a sudden realization hit him. He had seen that man before. He had crossed paths with him years ago, back before his wife passed away, in a place he never expected, at a different clinic, a clinic he had gone to for a routine checkup. The man had been there, but the father had never thought to ask why. Why would someone who had no apparent connection to the family be at the same clinic, at the same time, years ago? What was this man doing in their lives? The more he thought about it, the more the pieces seemed to connect, and the more his mind raced with possibilities. Could the man be connected to what was happening to his daughter now? Could he be the one pulling the strings behind all of this? But the father's search for answers didn't stop there. As he continued digging, the more he uncovered, the more disturbing the connections became. It seemed as though the deeper he went, the more people he could no longer trust. Everyone was hiding something. Even Emily's warnings began to feel like part of the puzzle, as if she, too, had become a pawn in a much larger game. There were moments when he wanted to pull away, to shut it all out and pretend it was nothing more than a series of coincidences. But he couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in his gut that told him something was terribly wrong. Meanwhile, Emily was experiencing her own turmoil. After receiving the strange message, she began to notice odd things happening around her. She'd catch glimpses of shadows moving in her peripheral vision, and sometimes, when she checked her phone, she'd find strange, cryptic texts from numbers she didn't recognize, messages that seemed to come from someone who knew things about her that they shouldn't. At first, she thought she was just imagining things. But then, one day, when she was picking up her daughter from school, she was confronted by someone she hadn't seen in years, an old friend of the family, one who had been close to her mother before she passed away. The man, his name was Richard, approached her in the parking lot, his face pale and anxious. "You need to stop asking questions," Richard said, his voice low and urgent. "This is bigger than you think. You're in over your head. Leave it alone, before it's too late." His words hit her like a slap to the face. She had barely spoken to Richard in years, and now here he was, telling her to back off. About what, exactly? She didn't know. But there was a look in his eyes, a look of genuine fear, that sent a chill down her spine. Richard's warning only added to the growing sense of danger surrounding the family. The more Emily thought about it, the more it became clear, someone was actively trying to keep them from uncovering the truth. But who? And why? Every person she reached out to seemed to be either hiding something or actively working to derail her investigation. The more she tried to peel back the layers, the more the truth slipped further out of her grasp, leaving her feeling like she was chasing shadows. As the pieces of the puzzle grew more scattered, the question became not just about what was happening to the girl, but who was behind it all and whether anyone could be trusted. The stakes were higher now, and the family found themselves trapped in a web of lies and deceit that was unraveling faster than they could piece it together. Each step they took to uncover the truth only led to more confusion, more danger. And with every new clue, every new person they confronted, the realization set in. The truth was out there, but it was buried so deep that finding it might cost them everything they held dear. And just when the father thought he was finally closing in on something, another unexpected twist left him questioning everything he thought he knew, because the face he saw on the other side of the door, standing there with a smirk that sent chills down his spine, was someone he hadn't seen in years. Someone he thought he could trust. But now, he wasn't so sure anymore. The father couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, and it was only growing stronger with each passing day. Every time he closed his eyes, the images, the phone call, the strange warnings, the cryptic messages haunted him. He could feel the tension building, like a storm that was gathering just beyond the horizon, too close to ignore but not quite ready to break. Yet, the events that transpired in the following days would make everything he had feared a reality. It started with the phone call that came late at night. The father had just returned home from another fruitless search for answers, exhausted, his mind clouded with doubts, when the phone rang. The number on the screen was unfamiliar, but something in his gut told him to pick it up. His heart raced as he pressed the phone to his ear, but the line was eerily silent for a moment. Then, a whispering voice broke the stillness. "Don't trust anyone. They're watching you. They're watching all of you. Get out now." The voice was unfamiliar, low and gravelly, but the urgency behind it was unmistakable. It wasn't just a threat, it was a warning. A chilling, bone-deep warning that sent shivers up his spine. Before he could respond, the call was abruptly cut off. He sat there in the dark, the weight of the words lingering in the air, feeling a rush of panic creep up from his chest, constricting his breath. Who was it? What did they want? And, most importantly, how did they know? The realization hit him hard. Whoever was behind this wasn't just watching his daughter, they were watching him too. The next few days passed in a blur of growing unease. The father tried to convince himself that it was just paranoia, that maybe he was overthinking things. After all, his mind had been working overtime, piecing together a puzzle that seemed to get more complicated with every new clue. But that wasn't enough to erase the gnawing feeling that something terrible was about to happen. And then it did. Emily, the voice of reason in the family, vanished. It happened so suddenly, so inexplicably, that the father didn't even know how to react. One moment, she was texting him, asking if he had any new updates, and the next, nothing. Her phone went straight to voicemail, and when he tried calling her, the line was dead. Panic rose in his throat as he raced to her house, hoping that maybe she had just lost track of time or had gone out somewhere without telling him. But when he arrived, the door was locked, and there was no sign of her. He tried calling her neighbors, asking if they had seen her, but no one had. They hadn't heard from her in days. It was as if she had disappeared into thin air. His mind raced as he tried to make sense of what was happening. Could Emily have been the one who was really being followed? Was someone warning her, just like they had warned him? The more he thought about it, the more it seemed like the pieces were falling into place, but there was something missing, a critical part of the puzzle that eluded him. He needed answers, but the closer he got, the more dangerous things seemed to become. And the worst part? The fear gnawing at him wasn't just for his sister's safety, it was for his daughter's. Had something happened to Emily because of her? Was someone coming for them all? The weight of the situation settled on his chest like a boulder, crushing him under the realization that they were in serious danger. He felt as if he were being suffocated, trapped in a nightmare that he couldn't wake up from. The phone call, the message, Emily's sudden disappearance, it all felt like a twisted game, and he was losing. That night, when the father was alone in his home, he couldn't shake the sense of being watched. Every creak of the floorboards, every sound from outside, felt amplified, like it was all part of some sinister plot unfolding around him. He checked the locks on all the doors, double-checked the windows, and yet still, the feeling persisted. He couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. Every shadow seemed to shift, every passing car outside his window a reminder that he was being hunted, but by who? And why? The more he thought about it, the more he realized just how deep this went. He couldn't trust anyone anymore, not even Adam. His brother-in-law's sudden appearance, his cryptic warnings, his change in behavior, it all seemed like part of the puzzle he hadn't fully understood. Was Adam involved in this somehow? Was he playing both sides? The questions circled in his mind like vultures, each one feeding the growing paranoia that threatened to swallow him whole. Then, just when he thought he might lose his mind with fear, the phone rang again. This time, there was no whispering voice. Instead, it was a familiar sound, one that sent a chill straight to his spine, his daughter's voice. She was on the other end, but her tone wasn't the warm, familiar voice he'd known for years. It was cold, distant, almost robotic. "Dad, you need to stop. You need to forget about everything. They're watching. You're not going to make it out if you keep going. Leave. Now." Before he could say anything, the line went dead again. The father stared at the phone, his hands trembling, his mind reeling. Was it really his daughter? Had something happened to her? Or was this just another part of the twisted game he was trapped in? The chilling words echoed in his mind, and for the first time, the father realized that they weren't just trying to warn him, they were trying to break him. To make him stop digging, to make him surrender to whatever dark force was lurking just beyond his reach. The fear that had been building for weeks now threatened to overtake him. He knew he had no choice but to keep moving forward, to keep searching for answers, even if it meant putting himself in even greater danger. But the more he tried to uncover the truth, the more it seemed like the walls were closing in on him. He had no one to trust. No one who wasn't involved in this web of lies, threats, and manipulation. And as the danger escalated, the father felt the weight of his own isolation more than ever. The tension was unbearable, and as the days passed, it became clear that he was running out of time. He didn't know who was behind this or what they wanted, but one thing was certain: they weren't going to stop until they got what they wanted. The father's only hope was that he could figure it out before it was too late. But with Emily missing, the threats growing stronger, and his daughter's strange behavior continuing, he began to wonder if it was already too late. Every step he took only seemed to make things worse, and as the shadows of his past and present collided, the father was forced to confront the chilling reality that the danger was much closer than he ever could have imagined. The more he uncovered, the less he understood, and the more he realized that the mystery was far darker than he had ever anticipated. Every answer seemed to lead to more questions, and the deeper he dug, the more the stakes grew. He had no idea who was pulling the strings, but he knew one thing for sure: whoever they were never going to let him go. And with each passing moment, it seemed that his chance to uncover the truth and survive was slipping away. Just when the father thought he couldn't take any more twists, something happened that shattered everything he believed to be true. His search for answers, his desperate attempts to protect his daughter, and the growing threats against his family, everything seemed to be leading him in one direction. But nothing at all, could have prepared him for the truth that was about to surface. It started with a chance encounter, an unexpected meeting that felt almost too surreal to be real. He had been sitting at a cafe late one night, his mind racing as he tried to piece together the latest lead he had followed: a half-burned letter he had found tucked away in his daughter's drawer. The letter, written in a handwriting he didn't recognize, seemed to be an urgent plea for help. But before he could examine it any further, his phone buzzed with a message that made his heart stop: "Meet me at the old clinic tomorrow night. I have information that will change everything." The message was from a number he'd never seen before, but something about it made his blood run cold. The mention of the clinic, the place where it all seemed to begin, was too significant to ignore. Without hesitation, he made up his mind. He had to go, even if it meant walking into whatever trap was being set for him. The next evening, he arrived at the clinic, the old building looming in front of him like a ghost from the past. The windows were dark, and the only sounds were the distant hum of traffic and the rustling of the wind. As he stepped inside, the scent of antiseptic and dust filled the air, but there was something else, something unsettling about the silence that seemed to swallow everything around him. It was then that he heard the footsteps behind him, slow and deliberate, followed by a voice that made his skin crawl. "Did you think you were the only one searching for the truth?" The voice belonged to none other than Richard, the family friend who had warned Emily to stop asking questions. The man who had seemed so out of place just days before was now standing there, his expression unreadable, his eyes cold. The father was stunned, confused. What was Richard doing here? Had he been following him? Was he involved in all of this? But Richard's next words would leave him speechless. "You've been looking in all the wrong places," Richard said, his tone almost sympathetic. "The real mystery isn't your daughter, and it's not about the threats you've been receiving. The truth is far more complicated than you could ever imagine. Your daughter, she's not the one they're after." The father's mind raced, trying to process what Richard was saying. "What do you mean? What are you talking about?" He stepped closer, his breath coming in short gasps, the weight of the situation crashing down on him. Richard's face twisted into a grim smile as he leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. "It's you. You're the reason this is happening. All of this, the warnings, the messages, the danger, it's all because of you." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. He took a step back, feeling dizzy, as if the world had just tilted on its axis. "What are you talking about?" he repeated, his voice shaky, barely above a whisper. "Why would it be me? I'm just trying to protect my family." Richard shook his head, almost pityingly. "No, you've been running from the truth for years. And now it's caught up to you." He paused, letting the weight of the words sink in. "You don't remember, do you? The clinic, the experiments, what happened to your wife?" The father felt his knees weaken. He had known, somewhere deep down, that there was more to his wife's death than the hospital had told him. But he had buried the doubts, silenced the questions in his mind. He had accepted the official story that she had passed away after a brief illness, nothing more. But now, standing here, facing Richard's cold, knowing gaze, he realized just how wrong he had been. Richard continued, his voice becoming more urgent. "Your wife wasn't sick. She was part of something much darker. Something that you've been kept in the dark about all these years. The clinic. It wasn't just a place for routine checkups. It was a front, a cover for illegal experiments. They were testing something on her, and on others like her. And when she found out, when she started asking the wrong questions, they silenced her." The father's heart pounded in his chest, his thoughts spinning out of control. "No, that's impossible. I would have known if she was involved in something like that." "You think you knew everything about her?" Richard's voice was laced with bitterness. "You were kept in the dark, just like everyone else. And now, because of that, your daughter's life is in danger. They've been watching you, waiting for you to figure it out. But now it's too late." The father's hands trembled as he gripped the edge of a nearby table, trying to steady himself. The world around him seemed to blur. All the pieces, the strange warnings, the cryptic messages, Emily's disappearance, it was all connected, but in a way he couldn't have possibly imagined. And what Richard was saying, the implications of it, were so much worse than he had feared. It wasn't just about his daughter. It was about everything. The family, his past, his wife's death, it was all part of a twisted web of secrets that went far deeper than he could ever have anticipated. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "What do you want from me?" Richard's smile faded, replaced by a look of grim determination. "I'm trying to help you. You're running out of time. If you don't stop this now, they'll come for your daughter next. And then, after that, they'll come for you. But it's not just them you need to worry about." Richard's eyes narrowed. "There's someone else. Someone even more dangerous. And they've been hiding in plain sight." The father's blood ran cold. He felt a chill sweep through him as the weight of Richard's words settled in. "What are you saying?" he demanded, his voice cracking under the pressure. "You've trusted people you shouldn't have," Richard replied, his gaze intense. "And now, it's too late to undo the damage. The person you think you can trust, the one who's been guiding you, has been playing you the entire time." The father's mind raced, trying to connect the dots. Who could it be? Who had he trusted? And just as the thought formed in his mind, his phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a message, but this time, it wasn't from an unknown number. It was from Emily. "Dad, it's me. Don't trust Richard. He's not who he says he is." His heart stopped. The ground beneath him seemed to give way. Everything he thought he knew was suddenly in question. Richard, his wife's old friend, the man who had warned Emily, the one who seemed to be trying to help, was now the one who was being exposed as part of the deception. The truth, whatever it was far more complicated than he could have imagined. And with the clock ticking down, the father was forced to confront the terrifying reality that the biggest threat wasn't the ones who had been hunting them all along, it was someone much closer to home, someone he had trusted more than anyone. And now, nothing would ever be the same again. The phone call came at the worst possible moment. The father stood there, stunned, his hands still shaking from the revelation that had just shattered his entire world. Emily's message, the one that had come through just moments ago, had sent a shockwave through him, leaving him grappling with the impossible truth. Richard, the man he had trusted, the man who had been close to his family for years, was now a key part of a web of lies, manipulation, and danger. But what could he do? The walls were closing in, and now, with the ticking clock counting down, the weight of his decisions felt unbearable. The phone rang again, pulling him out of his spiraling thoughts. This time, it wasn't Emily, and it wasn't Richard. It was his daughter. Her voice came through, strained, fragile, just barely holding it together. "Dad," she whispered, and for a moment, the father felt his entire world tilt on its axis. The sense of urgency in her voice hit him like a slap. "You need to come. They're after me. I don't know how much longer I can stay hidden." His heart thundered in his chest as his mind raced. He knew what he had to do. He had to get to her, no matter the cost. The very thought of something happening to his daughter, of losing her, was enough to make him move, to make him ignore the warning bells going off in his head. But then, as he moved to grab his keys, he paused, the words that Richard had spoken to him echoing in his ears. "There's someone closer than you think. Someone you've trusted more than anyone." The father's breath hitched, his grip on the phone tightening. Could it be? Could the person he was racing to protect, the one who had been his everything, actually be part of this whole mess? Could his own daughter be involved in something that had now spiraled so completely out of control? The thought was too much to bear, and yet, it was all he could think about. What if the messages had been a trap? What if the very person he was going to save was the one who had been pulling the strings all along? In a panic, he stepped outside, racing to his car, his mind a storm of conflicting thoughts. But before he could even start the engine, a shadow appeared at the door of the clinic. It was Richard. The father's stomach churned with every step Richard took toward him, his expression unreadable. He had no time for this, no time for explanations, no time for anything except getting to his daughter. But Richard wasn't having it. "Don't do it," Richard's voice was low, firm. "You don't know who you're dealing with. If you go to her now, it'll be the last mistake you make." The father's entire body froze. Every muscle tensed, every instinct screamed at him to ignore Richard, to continue the path that he knew was the only way to save Emily. But a part of him, the part that had been pushed to the brink by all the lies and manipulation, couldn't ignore Richard's warning. His voice caught in his throat as he demanded, "What the hell are you talking about? What do you mean it'll be the last mistake I make?" Richard's eyes darkened, his tone shifting from warning to something more ominous. "It's her, don't you see? She's been playing you. She's been part of this all along, and now it's too late. You're running toward a trap. A trap that's been set for you from the very beginning." The words hit like a punch to the gut. The father stood there, unable to move, unable to breathe. All this time, all his efforts, every step he had taken to protect his daughter, had it all been for nothing? Was he really walking into a trap set by the very person he was trying to save? The thoughts came crashing in, overwhelming him with a sense of betrayal, disbelief, and fear. Could Richard be right? Could everything he had believed about his daughter be a lie? His mind raced as he tried to process it, tried to make sense of the chaos around him. Richard took another step forward, his voice dropping into a quieter, more insistent tone. "You don't have to trust me. But you need to think carefully. If you keep going, you'll lose more than just her. You'll lose everything. And they'll come for you next." He paused, his eyes locking onto the father's with an intensity that made him hesitate, even just for a second. "The truth is darker than you think, and it's time you face it." The father stood there, torn between two choices that both seemed impossible. On the one hand, there was Emily, his daughter, the person he had sworn to protect with everything he had. On the other, there was Richard, who, despite everything, seemed to know things that no one else did. Could he really afford to ignore Richard's warning, to run into the unknown? Could he afford to gamble with his daughter's life if Richard was telling the truth? "Tell me what's going on, Richard," the father demanded, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and frustration. "Tell me everything. I'm done with the games." Richard hesitated, looking around them, as if weighing the cost of revealing the truth. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke, his voice low, barely a whisper. "There's a lot you don't know about your daughter. More than I can explain in a few words. But if you go to her now, if you don't stop, your life, your family, everything you care about, will be destroyed. It's not just about saving her anymore. It's about saving yourself from something you can't even begin to understand. Trust me, you don't want to make this choice." The father's head spun. He had no idea who to trust anymore. His entire world was collapsing around him, and he was caught in the middle of something so dark, so tangled, that no matter which path he took, it felt like he was doomed. If he turned his back on his daughter now, could he ever forgive himself? But if Richard was right, and he was starting to think Richard might be right, could he afford to walk into the trap he had been set up for? His phone buzzed again. Another message from Emily. "Please, Dad. Come. It's not too late. They're after me, they're after you. Please help me." Her words tugged at his heart, the desperation in them sinking into his soul. But he couldn't ignore Richard's warning either. The fear of making the wrong choice paralyzed him. "Dad," Richard said, almost pleading now, "it's not just about your daughter. It's about what she represents. The people who want her are the same ones who are after you. And if you make the wrong move now, you'll never see the truth or her again." The father's mind felt like it was breaking. The weight of the decision was crushing him, suffocating him. No matter which choice he made, the consequences would be catastrophic. He felt a wave of dread wash over him, knowing that the decision he made now could destroy everything, and the worst part was, he had no idea which choice was the right one. Every option seemed equally dangerous. In that moment, as he stood frozen, the realization hit him harder than any of the threats or warnings. This wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a fight for everything he believed in, for everything he loved. But to save it all, he was going to have to make a choice no parent should ever have to make. And the cost would be higher than anything he could have imagined. The tension in the air was unbearable, and every breath the father took felt heavier than the last. His hands gripped the steering wheel of his car, knuckles white, as he sped down the dark streets toward Emily, toward whatever awaited him. But every decision felt like it was pulling him further into a labyrinth of lies, betrayal, and a conspiracy that was far larger, far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. It wasn't just about his daughter anymore. It wasn't even just about the clinic or the messages. This was something much deeper, something that had been lurking beneath the surface of his life for years, and now, it was rising up, threatening to swallow everything whole. He could still hear Richard's voice in his head, that chilling warning echoing over and over. "It's bigger than you think. You're not just dealing with a rogue clinic. There are people everywhere right under your nose who want to see you destroyed." The father's heart pounded in his chest as he thought about it. People close to him. People he had trusted his whole life. How many were involved in this? How far did this conspiracy run? He felt like the walls were closing in, and he didn't know who was on his side anymore. As he pulled up to the abandoned warehouse near the outskirts of town, the place where he had been told to meet Emily, he noticed something out of the corner of his eye. A figure was standing in the shadows just beyond the dim light of the street lamp, watching him. The hair on the back of his neck stood on end as he scanned the area, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. But before he could react, the figure stepped forward, and his breath caught in his throat. It was Claire, his wife's sister. The one person who had always been so supportive, so dependable. The one person he had never questioned, not even for a second. But now, as she stood before him in the night, her face hard, her eyes cold and calculating, he felt a knot of dread twist in his stomach. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, his voice sharp, confused. Claire had always been there for him after his wife's death, always offering help, support, and guidance when things seemed impossible. But now, standing in front of him, she looked like a stranger. The warmth he had always associated with her was gone, replaced by something else. Something dangerous. "I could ask you the same thing," Claire said, her voice cold and emotionless. "Did you really think you could just walk into this without consequences? Did you think you could dig through the past and not uncover things that were meant to stay buried?" The father's mind raced. The past? What was she talking about? The unease in his gut flared to life, growing stronger with every word she spoke. "What's going on, Claire?" he demanded, trying to steady his voice. "What are you hiding?" Claire took a step closer, her gaze never leaving his, and in that moment, he realized something he had never thought possible. She wasn't here to help him. She wasn't here to protect him. She had been watching him. Watching Emily. Watching everything. "You really don't get it, do you?" she whispered, almost pityingly. "This has never been about protecting you or Emily. This is bigger than you. Bigger than both of you. You've been played from the start. The words hit him like a punch to the gut, and for a moment, he couldn't breathe. His chest tightened, his heart pounding in his ears. You're part of this. You've been involved this whole time? Claire's lips curled into a dark smile. I'm not just involved, darling. I'm running it. The world seemed to tilt, spinning out of control. The father's legs felt weak beneath him, and he stumbled back, almost collapsing against the side of his car. No, this can't be true, he muttered under his breath. You can't be behind all of this. The words were barely a whisper, disbelief and betrayal hanging in the air like an insufferable weight. Oh, but I am, Claire said, stepping even closer now, her eyes narrowing with something sinister. And you're the reason it all has to end. You and Emily, you've become a liability. You don't understand how big this really is. There are more people involved than you can even imagine. And if you keep digging, if you keep fighting, you won't just lose her, you'll lose everything. The father's breath came in short, ragged gasps. The walls were closing in faster than he could comprehend. Every lead, every piece of evidence had been leading him to this, but now, as he stood there, facing the woman he had trusted, everything felt like it had been a lie. His heart thudded painfully in his chest, the weight of the truth crashing down on him. Claire was behind it all. She had been playing him, manipulating him, feeding him just enough information to keep him moving forward but never enough to see the full picture. You're telling me that all this time, everything? The clinic, the threats, the warnings. It was all part of your plan? His voice was hoarse, the anger and betrayal choking him. Claire's smile grew wider, darker. Not just my plan, no. This is much bigger than you. There are people who have been pulling strings for years, people who are well beyond your reach. They have their hands in everything, politics, business, healthcare. They've been waiting for the right moment to strike. And that moment is now. You've just been too blind to see it. His head was spinning. This wasn't just about a clinic or some corrupt doctors. It wasn't just about his daughter or even his wife's death. This was a vast, shadowy network, one that extended far beyond his comprehension, and now he was caught in the middle of it. Claire, the one person he had trusted, had been part of it all along. She wasn't the only one, either. How many more people were involved? His mind couldn't process it fast enough. I've been trying to save her, he whispered, almost to himself. But you've already lost her, haven't you? Haven't you? His voice rose, shaking with the weight of the realization. Claire's eyes flickered briefly with something that might have been guilt, but it was gone almost immediately, replaced with cold resolve. She's not the one you need to worry about anymore. It's you. You're the last piece. If you walk away now, we can still make this clean. But if you keep pushing, if you keep trying to fight us, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. The threat hung in the air like a promise. The father was frozen, trapped between the crushing weight of the truth and the desperate need to protect his daughter. But what was he protecting her from? The truth? The lies? Or was the real danger standing right in front of him, in the form of the woman who had once been his closest ally? As he stood there, the sound of distant footsteps caught his attention. He turned, hoping, praying it was Emily, but when he saw who it was, his stomach dropped into his shoes. It wasn't Emily. It was someone much worse. Someone much closer to the heart of the conspiracy. Someone he never could have expected to see. And everything he thought he knew about his family, his life, and the fight he had been waging, would change in an instant. The stakes had just been raised, and now, there was no turning back. The father stood frozen, his heart pounding in his chest, every inch of his body on high alert as Claire's words hung in the air like poison. You're the last piece, she had said, and for the first time since all of this began, the weight of that statement hit him with crushing force. He felt like he had been running in circles, chasing shadows, but now everything was collapsing into one singular truth. There was no escaping it. There was no easy out. The people involved, his family, his closest allies, the ones he had trusted, were all players in a game that was much larger than he could have ever anticipated. And Claire, standing in front of him, wasn't just a bystander. She wasn't just his wife's sister anymore. She was the architect of everything that had gone wrong in his life. But just as the truth threatened to consume him, The world around him shifted. The figure approaching from the darkness wasn't just another shadow, this wasn't a random stranger. This wasn't someone he could easily write off. As his eyes adjusted to the low light, the realization struck him with the force of a truck. It was his brother-in-law, Michael. The one man he had always considered his closest friend, the person who had been with him through thick and thin, who had even helped him raise Emily after her mother died. He had been there for every birthday, every school play, every family gathering. The one person he thought he could rely on. And now, standing there in the dark, Michael's face was twisted into a cold, calculating mask of indifference. The father's breath hitched in his throat. This was the moment where everything fell apart. This was the moment where he had to decide, where he had to face the people he had loved and trusted, the people who had been manipulating him for their own ends, and somehow, someway, figure out how to stop it before it was too late. His mind screamed at him to act, to make sense of what was happening, but the words wouldn't come. He was paralyzed by the weight of the moment. Michael stepped forward, his hands raised in a mock gesture of peace, but there was no kindness in his eyes. Only cold calculation. "You didn't have to get this far," he said, his voice low, but full of that same icy tone that had always been present underneath his friendship. "If you had just listened to us from the beginning, if you had just accepted that some things are beyond your control, we wouldn't be here right now. But you had to play hero. You had to dig too deep. And now, look where we are." The father's pulse raced. His mind couldn't even begin to comprehend what he was hearing. Michael, too? It was like everything he had ever believed about his life was slipping through his fingers, dissolving into a nightmare he couldn't wake from. But the weight of the moment didn't allow him to crumble. Not yet. Not when Emily was still out there. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded, his voice shaking with fury. "I've trusted you. All of you. I trusted you." Michael didn't flinch. His gaze never wavered as he spoke again, his words colder than ever. "You think Emily's innocent? You think she's some helpless victim in all of this?" He shook his head, almost pityingly. "She's been playing a role in this since the start. She was never the sweet, innocent girl you thought she was. The moment she came into this family, she became part of the plan." The father staggered back, disbelief seizing his chest. No, that's not true. She couldn't have." Michael stepped closer, his face now inches from the father's. "You've been so blind, so damn blind. All these years, everything you've done for her, it was just to make sure you played your part in this. You've been part of a larger game all along, and now you're too deep to escape it. I warned you. It was too dangerous to keep digging." The father's mind was spiraling, trying to make sense of this, but the walls were closing in. There was no way out now. He had trusted his brother-in-law. He had trusted Claire. He had trusted everyone, and now it seemed like the people he had cared about most had been part of this dark conspiracy all along. The pieces were falling into place, but they weren't falling into a pattern he could recognize. His thoughts were jumbled, the terror and confusion creeping up on him. But then, in the midst of the chaos, a voice broke through. It was Emily. She had arrived. "Dad," her voice trembled as she stepped out of the shadows, her face drawn with fear. "Don't listen to him. Please. Don't believe them." The father's heart leapt in his chest, and for a moment, he felt a spark of hope that somehow, everything could still be fixed. But then he looked at her, really looked at her, and something in his gut twisted painfully. This wasn't the same Emily he had known. There was a darkness in her eyes now, something he had never seen before. She looked different, hardened, almost distant. Was it possible? Had she been involved in this all along? Was she the one pulling the strings, just like Claire and Michael? "You don't know what you're talking about," Claire sneered from behind him, her voice dripping with venom. "It's too late for you to play the hero now. You think your daughter's an innocent victim? You think she's still that sweet little girl you've been protecting? She's part of something much bigger than you ever realized, and there's no going back. You've all been pawns in this game, and it's time to face the truth." The father's world was spinning. Emily, the one person he thought he could trust above all else, was standing there, torn between the family she had known and the truth she could no longer deny. His heart was breaking, but there was no time to grieve. Not now. Not when everything was falling apart around him. But then, just as it seemed like the world would collapse entirely, the unexpected happened. As Claire stepped forward to finish her victory, something shifted in Emily's eyes. It wasn't anger. It wasn't defiance. It was fear. Pure, unbridled fear. She took a shaky step toward her father, and in that moment, everything changed. "Dad," Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't want any of this. They forced me. They told me to play along, to keep you distracted. But I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't lie to you. Before she could finish, there was a sharp crack, followed by a blur of motion. The father didn't see it coming. A shot rang out, and the world seemed to pause. Time slowed as his mind struggled to process the impossible, the horrific sound of a bullet slicing through the air. He turned, his eyes wide with horror, as Michael collapsed to the ground, blood staining the dirt. Standing there, holding a gun, was Richard. The man who had been lurking in the shadows, the one who had warned him time and again about the conspiracy. The one who had seemed like an enemy but was now, somehow, the only ally he had left. "Get out of here," Richard growled, his voice shaking. "Go. Now." Everything was chaos. The father grabbed Emily's hand, pulling her with him as they ran, their feet pounding the ground. The last thing he heard was Claire's voice, screaming in rage, but he couldn't stop. He couldn't stay to fight anymore. He didn't know what was real, what was true, and what the hell was happening, but all that mattered now was getting Emily out. There were more questions than answers, but one thing was certain. This war was far from over. And no matter how many allies or enemies he had left, he would find the truth, no matter the cost. But the road ahead was filled with darkness, and the real battle had only just begun. The weight of the last few days hung heavy in the air as the father sat on the edge of the bed, staring out the window into the quiet night. Emily, now safe, was in the next room, finally asleep after everything that had happened. The house was eerily calm, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he allowed himself to breathe. The chaos, the danger, the overwhelming sense of uncertainty, it had all led to this point. The fight wasn't over, but it had changed. He had fought his way through the darkness, not knowing if he'd ever see the light again, but somehow, miraculously, they had made it out. Yet, despite the sense of temporary relief, there was still an unsettling void inside of him. The truth had been uncovered, but it wasn't the kind of victory that left him feeling victorious. It had peeled back layers of his life he'd rather not have seen: betrayal, manipulation, and people he thought he knew turned out to be monsters in disguise. The conspiracy he'd unearthed was more vast than anyone could have imagined, reaching deeper into the foundations of the lives they'd built and shattering the illusions they had held dear. Even now, as he sat in the quiet, there was a constant hum in the back of his mind, the unanswered questions that remained, the whispers of things left undone. What did it all mean? Was there more to this than even he could grasp? He'd gone through so much, losing his wife, discovering his daughter was tangled in the web of people he'd once trusted, and learning that the truth was never as simple as it appeared. Claire had been right about one thing: he had been a pawn, and Emily, too, had been part of the game. But now, as he sat there, he wasn't sure if the pieces could ever fall back into place. Richard, the man who had come to their rescue in the nick of time, had disappeared soon after the confrontation, leaving behind only a cryptic message. "This isn't the end, not for you, not for any of us. There's always more lurking in the shadows." That warning, like so many others, hadn't sat well with him. Richard had saved them, but the uneasy feeling that there was still so much they didn't know gnawed at his thoughts. Who was behind it all? How deep did this web stretch? What had they missed in the chaos? As he tried to shake off the questions, a soft knock at the door snapped him out of his thoughts. Emily's voice came through, tentative but strong, the kind of voice that told him she had finally begun to find her own footing after everything they'd been through. "Dad, can we talk?" she asked, and there was something in her tone, something more mature, more knowing, that stopped him in his tracks. She hadn't been the same after everything had gone down, but she had also started to take ownership of her story. She had begun to understand the dangers, the stakes, in ways that no child ever should. His heart swelled with pride, and yet a painful ache lingered, a reminder of the innocence she had lost. "Of course, sweetheart," he replied, his voice catching. He stood up, walking over to the door, where Emily was waiting, standing a little taller than before, her face pale but determined. She didn't look like the scared girl who had been dragged into this nightmare. She looked like someone who had seen the dark side of the world and chosen to fight it. They sat down together, her hands folded in her lap, his fingers gripping the armrest of the chair. He looked at her, searching her face for any sign that she was still that little girl who used to curl up in his arms after a nightmare, but all he saw was a young woman, one who had weathered the storm and was still standing. "I've been thinking," Emily said quietly, breaking the silence. "About everything that happened, about what we learned, and about Claire. I never thought I'd be saying this, but I think I get it now. I think I understand why she did what she did. She wasn't just trying to hurt us. She was doing what she thought was necessary, part of a bigger plan that we could never have seen." The father felt a lump form in his throat as he nodded slowly. "I know, honey. I think I understand that too. But understanding doesn't make it hurt any less. And it doesn't take away what she's done. What they've all done." Emily looked down for a moment, then met his gaze, her eyes brimming with an intensity he hadn't seen before. "I know. But maybe we were too focused on the wrong thing. Maybe we were trying to fight something we didn't fully understand. There's still a bigger picture, and I don't think we're the only ones who know what's coming." The father's heart sank. "You're saying, what? There's more? You're telling me there's still something else out there? After everything we've been through?" Emily didn't respond right away. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. It was the same kind of note they'd seen before, cryptic, written in jagged handwriting, but this one was different. This one had been slipped under her door just hours ago, right after they had tried to settle in. She handed it to him, her hand trembling slightly. He unfolded it slowly, scanning the message. His stomach dropped as the words settled into his mind, the last, chilling twist that sent a wave of cold dread through his veins. "The game is far from over. What you know is just the beginning. You can't stop this. The real plan starts now." Ah. The signature at the end, just one letter. Ah, it was Richard's handwriting. The one person he thought he could trust had left them with this final piece, one that reopened the door to the nightmare they had barely escaped. His thoughts raced. What had Richard been trying to warn them about? Who was R? Was Richard just a pawn, too? Or had he been playing his own game the whole time? As the realization set in, he looked at Emily, her face pale but determined. "This isn't over, is it?" "No, Dad. It's just beginning." And with that, the silence returned, heavier than ever. The father felt a pang of sadness for what they had lost, for what they had uncovered. But also, he felt something else, a sense of resolve, the kind of resolve that only comes when you realize there's no going back. He had thought this fight was about saving his daughter. He had thought it was about justice, about exposing the truth. But now, he realized it was about something more. It was about survival, about facing down the darkness with the people he loved and holding on to what was left of their world. They were still in this together. But the road ahead was uncertain, and the shadows were still lurking, waiting to pounce. As he looked at Emily, he knew one thing for sure: whatever came next, they would face it together. But there was something haunting him, the gnawing feeling that the real enemy had yet to show their face. As they sat there, in the quiet aftermath of everything that had happened, they both understood something fundamental. No matter how hard they tried to escape, no matter how many battles they fought, the truth had a way of finding its way back to them. And when it did, it would come with a price they couldn't even begin to imagine.